Let's begin.
Hello and welcome to Pods Above Replacement, part of the Padres Hot Tub Podcast Network. My name is Raphie Cantor. I am the producer of Padres Hot Tub. And joining me from the Mile High City, he's running full speed and sliding into the pitcher's mound. It's John Precoda!
I'm a Savannah banana and I don't care who knows it.
You've been playing banana ball in your spare time?
Oh yeah. I love playing with the bananas.
Did you see, by the way, when Jake Peavy played for them and he used his actual gold glove?
Yes, I did.
That's the biggest swinging dick moment I've ever seen. I love that. I'm so happy that he's enjoying retirement. John, we are
Musgrove's going to be able to follow him. He's going to get one this year.
I know. We are recording this on the morning of Saturday, June 17th. And we are recording this as the Padres are playing the Tampa Bay Rays, who are really sort of a model for one of the things that we want to talk about in today's episode, which is the bullpen and bullpen construction, how the Padres are doing, and how they theoretically stack up against their opponents across Major League Baseball. But first, we hope you're watching us on YouTube. We're going to have a lot of nasty pitches, some Rob Friedman pitching ninja stuff that's going to be coming at you in this episode as we break down how our bullpen has been doing. And just a reminder for everyone, of course, you can download the YouTube Music app and watch this show for free. You know, you can walk around on the YouTube Music app with the show in your pocket like you listen to any other podcast. We're talking about something you want to see. You pull us out. All of a sudden, you're looking at us. It's magical. It's great. Please subscribe. Please subscribe to our channel. We just passed 600 subscribers. We're very happy about that. And if you are watching this, if you're one of the Pods Above Replacement faithful, we know you are the few and the proud, and you're actually watching this on Sunday. That means that you still have time to enter the Padres Hot Tub ticket giveaway. We're giving away a pair of tickets to Friday, June 23rd, Padres versus Nationals. And if you subscribe and leave a comment on one of the last two episodes of Padres Hot Tub, then you are automatically entered to win. So we hope you'll check that out. And finally, of course, we are a Patreon-supported show, patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub. That's how you can get into the Discord where John and I live, dwelling in our cave, growing beards and crunching numbers on the wall of the digital hellhole that is the internet. And we are there to be there with you and watching this. I don't know if I would call it enjoyable Padres season. It's exciting.
It's exciting.
It's exciting. But with that in mind, you know, one of the things that has truly been exciting about the Padres this year has been their bullpen. It's been quite impressive. And John, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the theory of how one would build a bullpen.
Yeah, so we're going to get into some specifics in a minute or two, but I just wanted to kind of structure this as, you know, what are we trying to build towards? We're kind of ambling our way towards being a consistent postseason team. Hopefully, we'll see, but we're going to try to build a roster that is successful in the postseason. And so you do need relievers in the postseason. You need a little bit more. It is an important thing, and you need to be able to use them properly. Maybe Hader against Bryce Harper would be a good idea. We'll see. But in the postseason, when starting pitchers tend to be limited to 2 times through an order more often, you tend to need a few more relievers. Depending on the year, it tends to run between 3.5 and 4.5 relievers that are used in a game. So what our theory is going to be going forward is that we need about 4, solid relievers who are healthy and currently performing well when you get to the postseason. 4. That's what we're hoping for, is at least 4. And you're going to comment on how depth of a bullpen matters more than the star of the bullpen. But the point here either way is that we need 4 names who are healthy, which means that we need some redundancy in that system, right? We need to make sure that, maybe we have 6 guys and 4 guys happen to be healthy and pitching well when playoffs come around. So that's going to be our little, thesis that we build this argument around.
Yeah, and just to kind of hammer home, this is something that we talked about in our episode that we recorded last week about lineup and roster construction. But in that Fangraphs piece that we referenced quite a bit on roster construction, one of the things that they talked about was the correlation between having a stud closer and expected wins versus having a depth bullpen and expected wins. And if you look at the chart that is on screen right now, you can see exactly what was being talked about, where basically that chart that has all top reliever WAR that refers to having a Josh Hader, Trevor Hoffman type stud closer, it's actually not super correlated to expected wins. Because obviously, understandably, they have very little control about what happens in the 8 innings prior to them coming into the game. So in terms of like allocating money for a top reliever, ultimately, while having a top reliever is nice, it's not something that one should necessarily build their bullpen around. It is more important to have depth, and if you look at the kind of the bottom half of that chart, you can see why. There's about twice as strong of a correlation between runs allowed and the number of 1+ WAR reliever pitchers that you have versus a top reliever. And with that in mind, we could talk about kind of how the Padres have been faring this year. And John, just before we get into the numbers, pretty good bullpen. I was like, wow. Been. I was kind of, I knew that they had that really long, 26 or 27 inning scoreless streak that they had been on. So they were going to be a little influenced by that. But they are 4th in Major League Baseball just in terms of ERA. So on a pure result standpoint, they're a top 5 bullpen. So that is, I'm cavelling. I'm so proud of them. This is great. But I can hear people say in the background looking at this chart, but Raphie, they're 11th and 5th. They're 11th and 5th, Raphie.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's saying that. I can hear them too.
Everyone.
Everybody knows about the 5th of the Padres bullpen. Not even Padres fans, just everybody.
Yeah. And to that, I would say you are very astute and we think alike. But the truth of the matter is the Padres have 2 things going for them that other teams don't, that could explain the gap between the gap between their FIP, the gap between their FIP and their ERA.
Also known as a GIP. Everybody, bring that to your friends.
Yeah, the FIP gap is the GIP. They have an elite defense playing behind them. Padres still leading the league in outs above average, so hurrah. And they play in Petco Park. And so some of those fly balls are going to be dampened. Just the general park effect is that it's going to, tamper down offense. And so I think that naturally explains the GIP, the FIP to ERA gap. And another thing that explains this, John, is that from a StatCast standpoint, they're producing pretty good results.
Yeah, I love volatility of bullpens, and every time you try to predict how your bullpen's going to perform at the beginning of the season, it's so it's almost like a effort and futility. We were all talking about how our bullpen's going to be so great. We have Hader in the 9th, building backwards. We have Suarez in the 8th. We have a litany of options in the 7th. We can go Luis Garcia if we need a righty. We can go Steven Wilson also with his sweeper. We have Pomeranz if we need the lefty. Oh wow, we have Nick Martinez if he transitions into the bullpen. And then you look at who's actually performing, and it's like, of all those names, it's been like Hader, Nick Martinez, Steven Wilson, and then just a group of people that we weren't talking about at all before the season started. So it is just funny predicting bullpens in general. And that is part of what we're going to argue in the roster construction argument going forward. But yeah, as you say, our bullpen has performed well. I mean, you could say our FIP is only 11th, which 11th is still good, but our the data suggests that it's because we've been pitching really well and folks have been performing poorly off the pitches that we make. And there are pitches that just have poor performance, and that's the reason why you throw them in the first place. We're 4th in the league in expected ERA as well as regular ERA, so we are actually throwing good pitches that are having poor results. Just a good example of that in general is like Steven Wilson traded pitch that would be better for FIP because it has a higher K rate, slider for a pitch that tends to be worse for FIP, a sweeper, because it doesn't have quite the whiff rate, but it has a poor batted ball contact and is therefore worse for FIP.
Yeah, and we don't have to look any further to our team's BABIP to kind of confirm some of these, and we've talked about BABIP a lot on the show, and BABIP, I think, at a really rudimentary level is used sometimes to establish quote unquote luck, especially like in small sample versus a large sample. So you need a really large sample to kind of use as the basis for BABIP as a comparison point. But for instance, hitters, if a hitter has a 500 BABIP in the month of May, but their career BABIP is 280, you can probably say, hey, they probably got really lucky. That's a really big discrepancy. Because unless someone completely reinvents themselves and has a much higher exit velocity and launch angle, or undergoes the Yandy Diaz evolution, so to speak, and starts lifting balls and stuff, their BABIP is probably going to be pretty consistent throughout their career. So you can use it as a comparison point. When it comes to evaluating pitchers, it's a little less certain, and especially a group of pitchers like this, because yes, it could mean luck in small sample, but it could also mean that, like, quite literally, it's just bad contact. That's why it's poor batting average on balls batted into play. And because of that StatCast data that John just referenced, and I'll back that up even further, I can safely say that our low BABIP, we have a 263 BABIP, which is the third in baseball, the third best in baseball, as a bullpen unit, is very clearly backed up by the fact that they do not allow hard contact. They are tied for first in Major League Baseball with the Miami Marlins in terms of the lowest exit velocity on batted balls. That is the bullpen. And the barrel percentage for the Padres is the fourth best in baseball, 6.6%. And finally, our hard hit percentage is sixth best in baseball at 36.7%. So you combine all that, tied for best in exit velocity, fourth best in barrel percentage, sixth best in hard hit percentage. You're starting to see a picture of a bullpen that is deliberately and successfully trying to limit hard contact. One last thing before kind of digging into some of the more individual performances on the team. The Padres have the second lowest left on base percent, or I guess second highest left on base percentage if we want to, talk about the actual number, but it's the second best left on base percentage as a bullpen unit. They have 77.4% for that number, second only to the New York Yankees. And sometimes left on base percentage is used as something to say, oh, like this is like keeping ERA artificially low because they're leaving a lot of guys on. That's unlucky and everything. And I would also counter that by the fact that the Padres have the third highest ground ball rate in Major League Baseball as a relief unit. And when you compare the ground ball rate of 48.5% with the elite defense, it's going to lead to a lot of double plays. It's going to lead to, a lot of guys coming in for mop up, our idealized version of our sweet prince, Tim Hill, coming in and leaving runners in scoring position. Hasn't been quite that way this year. But that is why the Padres are successful. It is a deliberate thing. I absolutely attribute this to Ruben Niebla in terms of philosophy, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that with some of the specific guys coming in. But I'm thoroughly impressed with how the Padres are doing. So before we move on to talking about some of the individual performances, John, was there anything that you wanted to add on kind of overall bullpen performance?
I mean, it's like I said, the variability of a bullpen is so interesting. It's like we don't have a high K rate because, a lot of the guys that are coming in don't have high K rates. We have these dudes that are just coming up, and like you said, you attribute a lot of it to Ruben Niebla, and I would as well attribute that to Ruben Niebla. If Darren Balsley got all the credit of always being able to, dash in a good bullpen like every year in and year out, then I think that Niebla deserves some credit for guys like Cosgrove coming in and just dominating, getting as much as you can out of Tapia, who has like a 2.6 ERA right now. Drew Carlton, just some scrap heap kind of guy that's like providing good innings. there is some things to be excited for around like the periphery of the roster on the pitching end, I think, going forward.
Yeah, certainly. And you mentioned the fact that we do not really have strikeout guys. We have the 6th lowest K rate as a relief unit in Major League Baseball, which is very surprising to me because, obviously if you think about a successful bullpen, typically in the modern game, you're thinking about high strikeout guys. I will point out that the Tampa Bay Rays do have the 2nd lowest K rate. We have the 6th lowest. So obviously there is precedent amongst teams that have this sort of stuff in mind. Anytime you're in a conversation regarding bullpen with the Tampa Bay Rays, I'd say you're doing pretty good. And just kind of breaking that down person by person, Josh Hader, obviously still a strikeout god. He's got 12.65 K per 9. Steven Wilson is just over the 10 K per 9 mark. Very good to see from him. But other than that, no one has a K per 9 above 9. Luis Garcia is the next highest, 8.71, and it just kind of goes down from there. But again, as we talked about just a few minutes ago, this bullpen is not making its name on strikeouts. It's making its name on soft contact. And you can look no further than a couple guys who are now familiar in the Padres bullpen. Nick Martinez, of course, but also Tom Cosgrove, who's been my sort of, if Steven Wilson's sweeper was the kind of early, joyous surprise of, April and May, I'd say Tom Cosgrove in May and June has really super impressed me with that sweeper and fastball combination. And the numbers show it. I'm going to put some stats on screen right now. This is the lowest exit velocity from relievers across all of Major League Baseball. And there's 2 Padres in the top 3 spots. You've got Pete Fairbanks from the Tampa Bay Rays, who's one of the best relievers in the game right now, who has the lowest exit velocity of 80.1 miles per hour. And then it's Tom Cosgrove at 81.8 and Nick Martinez at 82.8. So, when you have guys that are giving up soft contact like that in the heart of your bullpen, is going to be successful. We brought up his name already, Josh Hader. He's still Josh Hader. Like, he's still the guy that he's always been. He's had pretty limited opportunities, which might be something we talk about later. He's not been able to play and be effective in the way that we want him to be because the Padres offensively have not been showing up for him in that way. But he still has a 1.66 expected ERA this year. That is the 2nd lowest mark among all pitchers in baseball, all qualified pitchers, after Paul Sewald of the Seattle Mariners. And I mentioned Tom Cosgrove already. Drew Carlton. Drew Carlton was kind of the other name I wanted to bring up in terms of pleasant surprises. Carlton, I mentioned this on Padres Hot Tub, but he's kind of occupying the Chrismat role of 2021, 2022. He is kind of playing the mop-up guy or long relief role, but coming in and like Chrismat in those years, being actually super effective. And, I think some of the stuff plus numbers bear that out. He's got a plus pitch, and all of his other pitches are hovering right around average. And his results are great. He has a 3.16 FIP in 16 2/3 innings this year. And, his ERA is over 4, but I think he has just gotten a little bit unlucky there. All of his other peripheral metrics says that his number should be a little bit better than that. And just kind of going into the specifics of, the nastiest pitches in the Padres bullpen. I thought it'd be fun because, again, hopefully you're watching us on YouTube. If you're not, pull it up right now because this is going to be highlights galore that we're going to be showing you right now. Because now we're just going to have a little bit of fun. Obviously, the number one pitch that has revolutionized baseball this year is the sweeper. And we have a few guys in our bullpen that are throwing it. And even so, just sliders generally are kind of king in our bullpen. There's Josh Hader's slider, which of course has always been elite, and this year is no exception. He has a 122 expected WOBA on that. The actual results are even better. Hitters have an expected batting average of just 0.080, an actual slug of 0.059, an expected slug of 126. It's an incredible pitch. It's nasty. You're watching it right now. you can see how nasty it is. You cannot imagine having to go there and sit. Okay, I actually do have a question for you, John. If you had 100 chances, do you think you could hit a Josh Hader slider? Make contact. Do you think you can make contact with Josh Hader slider?
So Josh Hader is one of the best relievers in the game, obviously, but the problem with him, and one of the arguments maybe against a long-term contract for him going forward, is that no reliever as good as him has as poor of command as him. And so I wouldn't make contact with a bat, but I think one might make contact with me, so I'd still get on base. My OBP wouldn't be 0.
Okay, that's fair enough. So kind of staying on that slider train, we've mentioned his name, Tom Cosgrove, pleasant surprise of 2023. He is throwing his slider 58.7% of the time. So it is obviously by far and away his primary pitch. And he's getting great results on it. 236 expected WOBA. Hitters are hitting 129 against it, slugging 226. So those are great results in and of itself. But because he's throwing the slider so much, he's also able to throw a fastball and a sinker. And those pitches are, from a result standpoint, just as effective as that slider. And so, like, you're seeing in Tom Cosgrove what I would say is kind of like the idealized modern reliever that comes up from, the minor leagues in that kind of quad A position, because he's got one really, really, really nasty pitch. And the rest, everything is playing off of that slider. So the fastball looks a lot better than it actually is. The sinker looks a lot better than it actually is, et cetera, et cetera. Nick Martinez, you know him, you love him. We love him. We're big fans of BDN and his tight pants on this podcast. And as he, this is actually be an interesting discussion for us to have. But I'm of the belief that he needs to stay in the bullpen, and that like the version of Nick Martinez that is a reliever is much better and more beneficial to the team than the version of Nick Martinez that's a starter. Are you in agreement with that?
It's the reason why, and I'll probably bring this up later, I was interested in AJP's, the kind of modularity of the rotation and relief for this year, juxtaposed against the lack of modularity of the position players, was that, we have a couple guys, Big Dick Nick and Seth Lugo, who can kind of slot in one or the other spot. And the thing about having a good reliever is that their success does not give you benefit as much them compared to the person that's going to take their spot, i.e. if he's pitching in the 8th instead of Steven Wilson. The difference between Steven Wilson and Nick Martinez isn't that big. Where you get the value is towards the end of your roster, like not having to pitch Nabil Krismat in high leverage situations. That's where you get the value. So I think that argument is entirely dependent on our relief core at any given time. Like if we can build up Nick Martinez and it makes it so that we don't have to pitch Ryan Weathers for 5+ innings, then yes, that's worth it. And it's worth trading for a guy to put into the rotation to kind of make our relief core as a whole stronger if we don't have that depth. So I prefer him in the bullpen. I definitely do. Like, his stuff does work better in the bullpen, especially when you have one dominant pitch like he does. But you need a little bit of modularity, and I'm actually pretty impressed that as far as our pitching staff goes, we do. We have a lot of slot him in here. There's some redundancy in the system, basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that I love about Nick Martinez in the bullpen is that he can basically throw that changeup as much as he wants, and he does. He throws the changeup a lot, and it's an incredibly effective pitch. It's the pitch he's thrown the most this year so far, and that includes his brief time when he was in the rotation. And it's got a 294 expected WOBA, which is not elite, but it is very, very, very good. And but the thing that is elite is the whiff percentage on it. 40.6% of hitters are whiffing on that changeup, which is that's silly high. I mean, there's not another pitch besides Josh Hader's slider that has a greater whiff percentage in the Padres bullpen, which is pretty cool.
And one thing, if you look at I'm sure that you're showing it up on the screen right now. If you look at how the pitchers are performing, his four-seam fastball, which is just not a good pitch, is performing extraordinarily well in the bullpen version of him. You know, when he's able to just like use that as a secondary option rather than a primary option, that's the pitch that gets hit as a starting pitcher. And so now you're taking a bad pitch and basically making it a good pitch because people aren't looking for it. So like you say, he does end up being a much more valuable pitcher per inning in the bullpen, and it's not close.
Yeah, and you could just look at the usage. Like his four-seam fastball is his least used pitch this year so far. And so it's the same reason that we were just talking about with Tom Cosgrove's fastball, where it's like in and of itself, Tom Cosgrove's fastball is 92.2 miles per hour. It's not like it's some crazy pitch that like major leaguers haven't seen. It just is quite different from the slider that he's throwing nearly 60% of the time. The same thing can be said about Nick Martinez's changeup versus his fastball. Speaking of guys who have good sliders and then making their fastballs better, Steven Wilson, our 5-star Uber driver, are absolutely. I love Steven Wilson. I would put him into any game in any situation. I think he's earned it. I think the thing I wanted to talk about with his sweeper is like obviously it has good expected results, 280 expected WOBA. The actual results are even better than that. The thing that intrigues me about it is that like you look at the sweeper and you're like, whoa, that is a pitch that breaks a lot. Actually, like compared to other sweepers, it actually breaks less than average, which did surprise me. But the thing that doesn't surprise me is that the vertical movement, he has negative 6.2 vertical inches of drop compared to average, which is a good thing. That's a great thing on a sweeper because you think of a traditional slider that kind of dives down. A sweeper, you want to kind of stay on the same plane and just keep breaking away and it stays up. And then that's how you're going to get bats to miss it. And that is where we've seen Steven Wilson's sweeper truly excel. I mean, it is like so much better than the average compared to his peers in terms of vertical movement. So that has been very cool. I'm going to move on to Drew Carlton really quickly, but you were going to talk about Steven Wilson. I could see it in your eyes.
Yeah. I just unlike Nick Martinez and Tom Cosgrove, he actually has a really good fastball with a lot of ride on it and, more velo. It's not crazy velo, but the ride makes it look like it is taking off against you. And that's his secondary option when you're primarily looking for a sweeper. And then, less than 40% of the time, you're going to get that fastball when you're not expecting it. And it's like, unless you're just guessing on him, he's going to give you one of two really good pitches. And, best case, you get lucky, but like, he's going to be good going forward. You could draw up like little ways in which, people adjust to the Tom Cosgrove slider and then he's, stuck. But Wilson has two things that are both great and they're working off of each other. Steven Wilson's good.
Steven Wilson is good. And another guy who's good, not great, but good, Drew Carlton. And one of the reasons that he's good is that he has a disgusting pitch, which I've labeled the runny fastball, which sounds, it's gross. It's gross. The runny fastball, it sounds like it's sick, it's ill. Maybe it ate some spicy food and it's having a little bit of trouble, on the other end. It's just, and that's how hitters have felt about it, honestly. They have an expected WOBA of just 211 against a four-seam fastball that only goes 92.5 miles per hour. Okay, it is not like, and he throws it 50% of the time. It's not like we were talking about with the other pitches where this is his primary pitch. And the reason that it is such a good pitch, I was hoping that it would be a little bit more righty, and we could talk about kind of like, it's like that thing you throw at the top of the zone and the bats go under it and it's great, blah, blah, blah. No. Nay. It's running. It has 4.6 more horizontal movement inches above average than the average four-seam fastball. That's 53% better than average. So these guys are coming in there, they're expected to see a fastball, and all of a sudden it changes lanes on them. And that's what makes the pitch elite. So Drew Carlton, he's got a running fastball. He's going to be successful forever, and he's going to be the new star reliever of the Padres. Isn't that right, John?
I just have a little bit of pushback in that he is succeeding off. He's succeeding off a novelty pitch. Like his four-seam fastball that he's throwing at the top of the zone doesn't have ride; it has run, which makes it like somewhere between a four-seam fastball and a two-seam fastball. And you do see lots of times folks using that pitch at the top of the zone, getting through the first time through an order or the first couple times that they see a batter. But you do eventually oftentimes see somebody with kind of that between four-seam and two-seam fastball that they throw at the top of the zone. Lots of times people adjust to it. There are counter examples, like Sean Manaea's built a career on a between two-seam fastball and four-seam fastball pitch at the top of the zone. But I don't know. There's lots of times that people adjust to that pitch in particular.
Yeah. So with that in mind, we've kind of painted a little bit of a picture of our elite guys in the bullpen. We talked about Hader, we talked about Martinez, we talked about Wilson, Carlton, Cosgrove. These are some kind of quad A-ish, prospecty guys. We must be doing pretty good in the financial department, right, John? Like we must be having a pretty cost-effective bullpen, wouldn't you think?
Yeah. So we have Hader, and then a bunch of like you said, guys that are pre-arb. So surely we are not paying a lot. We are only paying the most in the entire league in terms of spending on a bullpen. If qualification, if you include Nick Martinez in the bullpen, which I think at this point is a fair thing to include. We are number one in terms of our full roster allocation towards our relief core. Number 2 is Boston. Number 3 is Chicago. 4, Houston. 5, Atlanta. And then 6 is the New York Mets, even including the fact that they just spent a grip of money on Edwin Diaz. We're the top spenders of all teams in terms of relief core allocation. And that's because we have four of the top 14 paid relievers, if you include Nick Martinez as a reliever. But even if you don't include Nick Martinez as a reliever, we have a lot of top 14 salaries. We have Hader, we have Pomeranz, we have Nick Martinez, and then we have Robert Suarez as well. That is just a lot of money that's going towards a bullpen that, most of those guys aren't contributing, at least right now. But there is good news in this. Like I said, there is some modularity to this. A lot of contracts are coming off the books next year. So Hader and his $14.1 million is technically coming off the books. Luis Garcia and his $3.5 million coming off the books. Pomeranz and his $8.5 million coming off the books. So just that alone is about $26 million. And as a whole, we're paying a little bit over $50 million to our bullpen as a whole. And then Nick Martinez, we'll see what happens with Nick Martinez. But not including Nick Martinez in the calculations for next year, we basically only have Robert Suarez and then a bunch of pre-arb people or people that are just now slipping into arbitration. So next year, we have a lot of ability to change things. But currently, oh boy, do we have an expensive bullpen.
Yeah. And God, I'm just like, we hadn't even mentioned Drew Pomeranz until now, and then just seeing his name mentioned here. Any day now, John. Any day now he's back and ride it over the sunset and carry us to victory. Now let's talk a little bit about what our bullpen looks like in 2024. I'm seeing the little list that you put together, and there's a lot of question marks in there. You want to dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, so we have, like I said, some free agents that are coming off the books, and then we have Robert Suarez, I guess, penciled in as our closer for next year. He's getting a 5-year, $46 million contract, which is a 9.2 AAV. And then we have, like I said, a bunch of pre-arb or early arb players: Steven Wilson, Tom Cosgrove, Drew Carlton. I think if Drew Carlton continues to succeed, you can at least put those are 4 guys, into our bullpen next year. And then, is Nick Martinez on our team at all next year? Is he a reliever? Is he a starting pitcher? I don't know about Nick Martinez. What is Domingo Tapia? What is Tim Hill? I mean, Tim Hill is single-handedly kind of tanking our strikeouts, our Ks per 9, with his 5 Ks per 9. But he's a cheap player. Maybe he's staying on the team. Who is Adrian Morejon? I don't know. He's tantalizing, I guess, every single year, but I never know whether he's going to actually contribute to the team. Is Nabil Crismat, does he have days left on the roster? Possibly. Brett Honeywell is somebody who's like, we didn't get into at all, and that's for a good reason. I don't think either of us are particularly excited about him going forward. And then you have some guys at the top of the minor leagues that could contribute pretty quickly. I mean, Ray Kerr has been jumping up and down on the roster and off the roster. And then there's Kevin Kopps, there's Alec Jacob, there's Angel Felipe. So there's names, there's not star names that you can just immediately say, like, we have this core. I would say, like, right now we have, like, Suarez, Wilson, and then, like, hopefully Cosgrove is good, and maybe Drew Carlton's good, and then one of these other guys, maybe a reliever comes up. But the thing that I would like to point out is the Niebla to Balsley comparison. And Niebla has a long history of being a minor league pitching coordinator for the Guardians, and that was from 2013 to 2019. And basically throughout that, his tenure in that position for the Guardians were consistently a cheap bullpen that had the 5th best ERA in the major leagues over that like span of time, despite having like no money. Like they weren't competing with the folks above them, like the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Astros, and the Cubs in terms of how much money they were allocating to the bullpen, but they were getting the same level of success. And so that's kind of the thing that I'm hoping for going forward, is that maybe he's able to have a little bit of that Darren Balsley magic where, like we were arguing, the totality of your bullpen is more important than your like strongest piece. And so if Niebla has that ability, that Balsley-like ability to just like take a, Tom Cosgrove and make him a solid middle relief pitcher, then that's going to be good. Like if Alec Jacob can come up and provide valuable innings, Kevin Kopps or Ray Kerr, whoever, I think that there's a good chance that like one of those or two of those or three of those provides depth value going forward. And if he can do that, then he's saving the team as a whole a ton of money. Because right now, like I said, we're spending a lot of money, well over $50 million just on bullpen pitchers alone.
Yeah. Before we move on, I just wanted to, every time you were like, who is Domingo Tapia? What is Brett Honeywell? I was like, it sounded like Jeopardy answers to questions. I was like, these are great questions, John. So before, let's move on actually and talk about just how reliever prospects work, because they don't work like, regular everyday, when you're thinking about 40, 50, 45, 50 value prospects, it's not quite the same numbers that you can use to evaluate them. Is that right, John?
Yeah, and for good reason, because they're not providing the same total amount of like WAR to a team, right? Because they're only pitching maybe like a reliever coming up can't be counted on for more than like 40 to 60 innings in all likelihood. And so it is a different scale, right? Because lots of times these relievers coming up, there's a reason that they are a reliever rather than starting pitcher. They usually only have one or two good pitches, or otherwise can't get through a lineup multiple times. Lots of times it's because of walk rates as well. So it's just a different group of people. But I mean, you can see as well as I do that basically nowadays when the middle relief comes up, it's just nasty guy after nasty guy after nasty guy on like all of the good teams. They have just like, you can get to the 5th inning against the Guardians and suddenly you're like, this is the guy they're using in the 5th inning? He's disgusting. And there's good reason for that. It's because you need one good pitch to be a good reliever. And with modern analytics and just building your pitches, the ability to get these guys who have a lot of talent to have at least one good pitch is very frequent, right? And so there was this Fangraphs article that looked at just 35 plus future value players, which 35 plus is below major league average, right? That's those guys. Looking at those guys who are marked as relievers going forward, it's just amazing how much like nasty stuff they have. They looked at 79 names on their 35 plus future value relievers board, and of those 79 names, over half of them sit above or 95 plus on their fastball, and 81 pitches were included in among those 79 pitches that were graded 60 plus. Yeah. Which 60 plus is a damn good pitch, right? That's like a Steven Wilson sweeper. And so the thing is, if you have those 35 plus future value, prospects, like there's a great chance that at least some of them like come up and have a one nasty pitch, and then maybe a Ruben Niebla is able to get a second pitch to tunnel off of it well enough to get good results, like say a Tom Cosgrove fastball working really well because really what he has is a really good slider. And so we have quite a few 35 plus grade pitchers coming up through the system. And I mentioned a few, like Alec Jacob is considered in that, and he's 25 years old, so like ready to come up pretty soon. Kevin Kopps is considered that. He's 26, ready to come up pretty soon. There's Moises Lugo, who's 24 years old, ready to come up pretty soon. Angel Felipe, who currently is sitting with a 14.5 Ks per nine, ready to come up pretty soon. He's not getting good results yet, so he's not ready to come up right away, but he has the nasty stuff that, if it's properly honed, could probably be one of those guys that, you know, pops up. And so I would like to say that we have like the building blocks to, you know, last week I said you get the marble and who's going to build the Pietà. Ruben Niebla might be able to build it, right? And so that's going to play into our role of like, let's get depth maybe over like star power going into our bullpen going forward.
So, okay, I hear you. But there's a counter argument to all this when it comes to the postseason, isn't there?
Yeah, so, well, I mean, there is and there isn't. So the postseason, you need a couple guys to be good. And like I said, you need 4 probably is what you want. And not only pitchers that are just good pitchers, but who are performing well at that time. The problem is that you don't necessarily know, because the sample sizes are so small, who exactly is going to be dominant until the minute like happens. Like Sir Anthony Dominguez was the pitcher who was dominant last year and had like a negative 1.05 FIP, which obviously is dominant. I mean, that's better than Hader performed in. I don't know if you remember last postseason, but Hader was just like every guy up is a strikeout, it felt like. But like Trevor Stefan, he was number 2, right in between Sir Anthony Dominguez and Josh Hader. That guy was a Rule 5 pick from the Guardians, you know? And like Luis Garcia, converted starting pitcher for the playoffs. Ryan Presley obviously got a lot of money off of his good performance. But like Nick Martinez was one of the dominant relievers in the playoffs last year. You never really know who exactly is going to be that guy. But if you have a cohort of guys with, you know, good skill, chances of somebody being healthy and dominant at that particular moment is high, right? And there is a lot of value to having good relievers. I'm never going to argue against that. Like in the regular season in starting pitchers versus relief pitchers in the regular season versus in the playoffs. In the playoffs, they tend to be much more efficient or just successful in general. Like your ERA drops off a lot while using relief pitchers versus starting pitchers in the postseason. And for obvious reasons, everybody's going full bore. And so, you know, you have these great scouting reports and folks are really honed in on the starting pitcher. And then you throw in a relief pitcher who can just throw as hard as he possibly can for like, you know, 3, 4, or 5 batters. Then obviously they have a huge advantage. And like last season in the postseason, the starting pitcher ERA in the postseason was 3.85 versus the relief pitcher ERA of 2.98, which is nearly a run off the total and as good as it's been in basically ever. So you do need good relievers. That's definitely not my argument. But my argument is that you need quantity of good relievers, i.e. four at the time of the postseason that are healthy and performing well, not, you know, one Hader and say Hader and Suarez and hope that they are doing well at the time. The thing that I do, like that I mentioned before, that I do like about like what Preller did in the pitching aspect of our roster is that he got those starting pitchers who can give you value during the regular season as starting pitchers in Lugo and Nick Martinez, and suddenly are guys that you would also feel comfortable with as being high leverage bullpen arms come the playoff time, like in Seth Lugo and Nick Martinez. And so now it's like you need four guys, and the chances that they are transition to the bullpen and become 2 of those 4 guys are pretty high. So I did like that with like the roster construction overall.
Yeah. We've talked about it before on the show, but AJP seems to have a mind for building a playoff roster. But the thing about a playoff roster is that it has to play 162 games before it gets to the playoffs, and maybe doesn't get to go to the playoffs depending on how it performs in those 162 games. So, you know, we will certainly see this year. So John, I see on here that you bring up the Astros as a potential example of some pairings, and you have a chart with 2019 top relievers to kind of round out our discussion. Do you want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing on screen right now?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the arguments going forward is sign Hader or don't, right? And you'd have to sign Hader to a longer term contract. Probably, I mean, Edwin Diaz just got 5 years, $102 million. You can argue whether Hader is going to generate quite that value, but I mean, you would argue at least 4 years and at least $20 million per. I would assume
that's going to be his agent's starting bid, basically.
Starting point,
is give me the Diaz deal, and I'm sure there'll be some negotiation from there.
But it won't be wildly different,
Right.
It'll be somewhere in the realm, somewhere around there, which is obviously a lot of money to give to one pitcher, and you're just talking for 4+ years. So I just went back 2019, which was not a long time ago, 4 years ago. This is like, these are the names that we would have been giving a contract to at the time. And, the number one pitcher that year, who was still good, is Edwin Diaz. Like, he was great in 2019 and he's still great now, but he did get injured. Because you'll see in this list, a lot of it has to do with not only volatility, but injury risk. Number 2, Blake Trinan, he is injured. Number 3, Craig Kimbrell, he has been terrible at times and then good at times. I don't even know what he is. Chapman, he obviously had to come to a new team and suddenly looks good again, but he obviously fell off. Kenley Jansen fell off a little bit. Roberto Osuna isn't even in the league anymore. Raisel Iglesias, good. Felipe Vasquez, not in the league anymore. Brad Hand is what Brad Hand is. Josh Hader, still good. Doolittle, wherever he is, I don't even know if he's still pitching. Ken Giles, Wade Davis, Corey Knebel, Jose Leclerc, Kirby Yates, Alexander Colome, David Robertson, who left the league and came back in that time. Dylan Betances, Alexander Reyes, who I don't even remember who that was. Oh, yeah, the St. Louis guy. But anyways, it's a lot of names and there's a lot of attrition on this list. So giving out a long-term contract that's expensive, and you can make the argument that yeah, but it's not our money, but it is opportunity cost. There's not an infinite amount of money that we're going to be spending. And for every $20 million that you spend on a reliever, that's $20 million fewer dollars that you can spend on starting pitcher depth, for example, and starting pitching depth that can transition into the bullpen. Would you rather have a Seth Lugo and a Nick Martinez who can provide starting pitching reliever or starting pitcher innings and then transition into a seventh inning, 7th, 8th inning kind of guy in the playoffs, or one Josh Hader? And my argument was that I would rather have, the two guys and then hope that one of them is successful come playoff time. I feel like there's this alternate reality that we don't really think about, where Hader came to us last year, just showing the volatility of somebody as great as Josh Hader in his prime. He came to us last year, and there was the order in which he was successful versus not successful happened to be good for us. In the 16 innings that he pitched for us in the regular season, he had a 7.31 ERA. And if you remember, he literally lost his closer job at one point during that and had to work his way back into it. 7.31 ERA in those 16 innings. And then he was dominant in 5 innings in the playoffs and gave up 0 runs. But if you swap those, suddenly, all the pitchforks would be out for Josh Hader and say, no, get rid of this guy. But it happened to be that they lined up properly. And, that was fortunate more than it was, the success of the roster building, I would argue. And so I would argue going forward, one, we're paying Niebla, and Niebla's, so far, I think we're all happy with Ruben Niebla. Hopefully he's able to build some depth within the organization. And then 2, if you're going to sign a couple guys, which I would definitely be down with signing a couple guys for depth, do it more in the Astros model, wherein they paid Ryan Presley 2 years, $30 million. They paid Rafael Montero 3 years, $34.5 million. And maybe not, 4 years, $80+ million for one guy who could be either injured or not currently in his successful state come playoff time.
Yeah, I would argue that paying top dollar for a reliever is maybe about the least efficient use of funds that a team can undergo. And if you want to think about it, again, from a more conceptual standpoint, one of the things we've talked about on the show is that for a position player, if you had a 4-WAR player, that doesn't necessarily equal 2 2-WAR players. It's actually more valuable to have one 4-WAR player for the sole reason that you get another roster spot. You get another spot for someone else to contribute value. But if you think about bullpens for a second, they don't quite work in the same way. There's only one Juan Soto. There's only one guy who's able to play left field. You're not constantly bringing in guys over the course of a game to play left field. You couldn't do that. Like, you'd run out of roster spots really quickly. But you can do that for the bullpen in a way. Obviously you're dealing with fatigue and you have to strategically think about guys. But most relievers really just are expected to have one off day in between starts. So you have a depth of guys. So for that reason, that's why depth is more valuable. And it's also why it doesn't make sense economically to pay for a lot of these dudes, because you pay for a Juan Soto because the economic rent, the opportunity cost that he presents, because there's only one left field that could be played. There's a bunch of dudes who could come in and close a game, So it's important to think about that going forward. And also, we paid for our long-term guy. His name's Robert Suarez. We haven't seen him yet this year. But he is supposed to be the guy that is going to be fulfilling that role, and then we can build around him. So I desperately hope that we do not pay for Josh Hader. I hope we ride him into the sunset, enjoy him while he's here, say thank you very much for your time in San Diego, and get that sweet qualifying offer.
Yeah, exactly.
And use that to rebuild.
That's part of the opportunity cost too, right? Like,
yes.
What is that value? It's a lot of value.
Yes, exactly. So this has been a super interesting discussion about the bullpen. John, is there any other parting words that you have for our audience before we wrap this thing up?
Yeah, one last thing on, like, how much we're paying Josh Hader, and like the value of that to what we're getting. He's been great this year. No arguments from anybody, I don't think. He's just been really good. He's also given 26.1 innings. You know how hard it is to build up a lot of value when you throw 26.1 innings over like nearly half of a season? Like Luis Garcia, who I think that I've seen once or twice all year in my memory, including blowing a game very recently at Coors, which was not fun to see. He only has less than six fewer innings than Josh Hader while being injured, throughout the year. Having the modularity, having the ability to call people up, send people down, just get in all these good arms and have them, throwing at the top of their game is worth a lot of money. And, having one guy who's great but only gives like 50 innings in a year, it's going to be hard. Like, you're going to have to pitch very, very well to contribute a lot of value to any given team.
Yeah. So this has been another episode of Pods Above Replacement. Again, we hope you are subscribed to us on YouTube. You watched this episode on YouTube. You saw those nasty pitches. You are commenting on this video as well. That it is a huge boost for us. It helps us. Tell your friends. Bring a friend next time to watch the show. Subscribe to us on our Patreon. You can heckle us. You can heckle us in the comments all you want. But if you really want to heckle us in our Discord, because we get notifications on our phone every time someone posts in our Pods Above Replacement Discord. So if you have something personal and you want to hurt our feelings, do it on the Discord. Okay, patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub. For John Precoda, my name is Raphie Cantor, and we will see you next time.